Let's talk about the most offensive symbol in history, not a swastika, not a middle finger, not some flag waving in a storm. No, I'm talking about a cross.
Yeah.
That wooden, blood-stained Roman death stick. You've seen it on necklaces, tattoos, church walls, but I swear half of us don't even know what we're looking at. It ain't art. It ain't cute. It's not a sentimental emoji for faith. That thing? It was an electric chair before electricity, a public shame pole, a weapon. The cross was where men screamed, not for 5 minutes, sometimes 3 days, nails through bone, body weight dragging your lungs into collapse, blood spit mocking, flies. Tell me again how that belongs on your gold chain. Why is it offensive? Because it exposes everything we want to hide. You think people are basically good. The cross says, here's what your goodness did to perfection. You think truth is relative. The cross says, there's one way, and it's covered in blood. You want comfort? The cross says, D first. You want control? The cross says, surrender now. See? Nobody hates the idea of a loving God. Everybody loves peace and flowers and nice stories. But the moment you bring up the cross, now you've got a problem. Because the cross doesn't ask questions. It gives orders. It doesn't tolerate your ego. It crucifies it. It doesn't negotiate with sin. It kills it. It doesn't pat you on the back. It breaks your spine if it has to. That's why it offends. Because it demands a funeral before a resurrection. Yours. You want to follow someone who was tortured, murdered, and came back to tell you to carry your own cross. Then don't act shocked when the world thinks you're insane. The cross is not polite, not safe, not modern. It's a scandal. It's a slap in the face to every human attempt to be good without God. And you know what? That's exactly why it saves. You want nice? You came to the wrong altar. You want truth. You're standing in front of it. Wood, blood, nails, the most offensive symbol in history, and the most necessary. The cross is not jewelry. It's not a design logo or a background for your selfies. It's a tool of death, a torture device created by the Roman Empire to humiliate, mutilate, and eliminate. And that's where the offense begins. See, most people today wear the cross like a badge, not knowing they're wearing the ancient equivalent of a noose, an electric chair, or a firing squad. You wouldn't wear a miniature guillotine around your neck, right? So why a cross? Because we've sanitized it, we've cleaned it up, polished it, we've taken the blood off, silenced the screams, and dimmed the raw horror of it, just so we can make it socially acceptable. But the truth is, if you ever stood under a real Roman cross, you wouldn't feel spiritual. You'd probably vomit. That's how sickening and brutal it was. It wasn't just execution. It was a public theater of suffering and shame. The victim was stripped naked, ripped open by lashes, nailed through arteries and bones, lifted up for all to mock while flies feasted on open flesh. That was the cross. So when you see it used as decoration or fashion, understand this. It's not cute. It's not neutral. It was the epitome of evil, a symbol of man's darkest instincts, cruelty, injustice, power without mercy. It was how empires silenced rebels and how religious leaders silenced truth. And then came Jesus, and instead of avoiding that brutal death, he just walked right into it, sex voluntarily, just not as a victim of fate, not as a martyr for a cause, but as the ass lamb led to slaughter, knowingly, intentionally, sacrificially. That's what flips the cross from a symbol of death into a weapon of redemption. But don't get it twisted. It still offends because it reminds us that, we were the reason for the nails. You want to feel strong, moral, enlightened. The cross says, you're broken, guilty, and someone had to die for you. Yes, you want to feel spiritual and at peace with yourself. The cross says, not until you deal with your sin. A sex offensive because it's honest. It pulls no punches. It doesn't flatter your ego or nod along with your self-help vibes. It puts your pride on trial. It confronts you with the truth that the best human beings could do to God was murder him. And somehow we still wear it like a souvenir. The cross is offensive because it was never supposed to be admired. It was meant to be understood, felt, faced, stared into until you realize, as stars, that should have been me. The blood is real. The pain was yours. The punishment earned. And the cross, still there, not as a relic, but as a reminder. The cross is not for decoration. It was, and still is, for execution. The cross doesn't unite the world. It divides it right down the middle lobe, and that's exactly why it's so offensive. People love the idea of universal love, unity, coexistence. That sweet fantasy where every belief system is just a different road to the same peaceful destination. But then the cross walks in like a wrecking ball through the middle of a carefully curated spiritual museum, and it refuses to play nice. It doesn't sit quietly next to Buddha, Muhammad, crystals, or vibes. It stands alone, violently, unapologetically. Why? Because it makes a AU claimal, not a suggestion, not a gentle opinion, a you claim of exclusive truth. And that is what offends modern minds the most. You can talk about God and people nod along. You can talk about higher power, divine energy, good vibes. Sure, that's trendy. But the moment you mention a man crucified on a cross for the sins of the world, who said he was the only way to God, everything shifts. Now you've drawn a line. Now you've said, this is the only door. All others are shut. That's not inclusive. That's confrontation. See, the cross forces a choice. It's not an accessory. It's a good fork in the road. It says, either this is the truth, or it's the greatest lie ever told. There's no middle. No gray, no soft landing, and the world hates that because we've trained ourselves to keep everything in a safe, lukewarm, non-offensive zone. But the cross doesn't care about comfort. It demands a verdict. You're either for it or against it. It doesn't leave room for neutrality, and this isn't new. It's always been like that. Since day one, the cross has divided crowds, split families, started riots, and gotten people killed. It didn't unite the ancient world. It threatened it. The early followers of Jesus weren't honored. They were abhunted. Why? Not because they were nice, not because they prayed, but because they said, there is no other name by which we must be saved. That statement, backed by a cross, was nucleared. It's still nuclear today. Say you're spiritual. People smile. Say you believe in love. Cool. Say Jesus died for sinners and he's the only way to heaven. Now you're intolerant, arrogant, dangerous. The cross draws a line not just in culture, but in the human heart. It splits us from our ego, from our excuses, from our right to be, right? It demands surrender. And surrender doesn't unite. It separates left. It calls you out from the crowd, makes you walk a different way, talk a different way, live a different way. The cross makes it impossible to blend in, and that's why it offends. It's a bold declaration that truth is not a democracy and salvation isn't a buffet. The cross doesn't hold hands with the world. It draws a sword. The cross offends because it exposes something most people spend their whole lives trying to hide. The ugliness of humanity. Not the surface level flaws, not the Instagram filtered imperfections, but the deep rot inside of. The evil we pretend doesn't exist. The bitterness, the rage, the pride, the perversion, the cruelty, all of it laid bare under the shadow of the cross. You can't stand in front of a crucified Savior and walk away thinking humans are basically good. The cross kills that lie. It shows us what happens when perfect love enters a broken world. It doesn't get welcomed. It doesn't get worshipped. It gets murdered egg, and not by monsters, but by regular people, religious people, civilized people, people with families and values and titles. They didn't kill Jesus because he was evil. They killed him because he called out their evil. That's the ugliest part. See, the cross is a mirror, and what it reflects is brutal. It says, this is what your sin costs. This is what your rebellion looks like. This is what justice demands. We like to think we're enlightened, progressive, educated. But the cross says we're lost, depraved, blind. It drags the darkness out of the corners and puts it on public display. It doesn't let anyone off the hook. Not the Romans. Not the priests, not the crowds, not you, not me. Because the offense of the cross isn't just that I of someone deed. It's that if someone had to die because of us, the worst in us demanded the best in him. And he gave it voluntarily. But that doesn't make us less guilty. That just makes grace more shocking. That's why the cross shatters pride. You can't cling to self-worth when you see the price tag of your soul hanging on a tree, bleeding out. You can't hide behind, I'm not that bad, when the innocent Son of God had to be slaughtered in your place. The cross pulls off every mask. It strips every illusion. It says, this is you, at your worst. And this is what it took to save you. People hate that. We'd rather believe we're a few good choices away from salvation. A few prayers, a few donations, a few nice gestures. But the cross says none of that is enough. Not even close. That offends the modern mind, the self-made man, the spiritual seeker. Because the cross doesn't flatter. It exposes, and exposure hurts. It hurts to see how much hatred lies under the surface. It hurts to admit you needed blood to be clean. It hurts to confess that your sin nailed love to wood. But that's the beauty of the cross. It wounds in order to heal. It cuts deep, but only to remove the disease. Still, most people turn away, not because it's ugly, but because it shows you they are you. The cross doesn't negotiate. It doesn't ask for terms. It doesn't say, let's meet halfway. The cross demands surrender. That's why it's so offensive, because surrender is the one thing human pride can't stomach. We're okay with trying. We're okay with religion, spirituality, improvement, effort. But surrender, that's war language. That means you lost. That means you lay down everything, not just the bad, but even the things you thought were good, and say, I have nothing left to offer. The cross doesn't deal with you like a life coach. It's not trying to help you reach your potential. It's not here to boost your self-esteem. It doesn't clap when you're making progress. It's a killing place, not a pep talk zone. When Jesus said, take up your cross and follow me, he wasn't inviting you to carry a burden. He was telling you to who will bring your death certificate. The cross is where your will, your plans, your identity, your entire kingdom gets buried. And that offends modern people more than anything, because we've been raised on the gospel of control. Build your brand. Choose your truth. Live your truth. Be your own God. The cross steps in and says, actually kill that version of you. No compromise. No options. Just full surrender or nothing. That's the deal. People say God should meet us where we are. He did on the cross, but he doesn't leave us there. He calls us out of sin, out of comfort, of self-rule, out of self-rule. He doesn't share the throne of your heart. He takes it. Or you stay dead. That's the part most churches don't want to preach anymore. They'll talk about love, grace, purpose, and all of that is real. But none of it comes goo before the cross demands your surrender. A surrender is not pretty. It's not emotional music in the background while you lift your hands. It's blood, sweat, fear, brokenness. It's Jesus in the garden saying, not my will, but yours. That's the model. That's the price. And that's what the cross calls us into. Full obedience that costs everything up, and still it's worth it. But here's why it offends us, because we don't want to give up everything. We want Jesus in our lifestyle. We want the cross and our pride. We want forgiveness and still be Lord of our own lives. And the cross says, no, you die, I live. That's why the symbol shakes people up. It's not asking for a piece of your life. It wants it all. The cross is a throne built from execution wood. It's where Christ rules, but only after you lay down ever to rule yourself. That's not popular, but it's the only way to be truly free. Surrender or walk away. The cross won't bargain. The cross doesn't just kill sin. It kills ego. And that's where the offense hits hardest. Because most people are okay with the idea of being forgiven. Who doesn't want grace? Who doesn't want a clean slate? But the cross goes deeper than forgiveness. It doesn't stop at your bad behavior. It goes after the core of who you think you are. It targets your pride, your identity, your independence, your self-made image. And it puts that on the cross, too. The cross isn't just where Jesus died. It's where you're supposed to die your old self, your old ways, your inflated sense of control and importance. The cross tells you that you're not just a person who sometimes messes up. It tells you that you were never the solution, you were the problem, and that's offensive. It wrecks every motivational speech that says, you've got this. Every Instagram quote that says, you're enough. Every self-help book that says, look within. The cross says, look within, and you'll see the very thing that nailed Jesus to that wood. That's not easy to swallow. The modern world worships self-love, self-discovery, self-expression, but the cross demands self-denial, not as a punishment, but because self was never the answer to begin with. We don't need to build ourselves up. We need to lay ourselves down. But we don't want to hear that because ego is loud. Ego wants to be applauded. It wants to be in control. It wants to be right. And the cross rips the mic right out of its hands and says, die. You can't follow Jesus with a swollen ego. You can't walk to Calvary while carrying your pride. That's why the call to take up your cross is a death sentence. Not just to sin, but to the idea that you could save yourself. The cross removes every excuse, every justification, every comparison. You don't get to stand next to it and say, well, at least I'm better than them. Because the cross levels the ground, it says. You're all guilty. You all need this blood. So when you see the cross, don't just see mercy. See judgment, your ego, judged and executed. See identity, redefined by sacrifice, not success. See a throne that looks like a tomb where you self-died so Christ could live in you. That's why the cross offends. Because it's not just trying to help you. It's trying to kill you, not out of hatred, out of love. Because the real you, the you that was always meant to live, only shows up who after the ego is buried. The world says, believe in yourself. The cross says, crucify yourself. One path leads to performance and pride. The other leads to freedom. But only one leads to resurrection. And it always goes Godet through a grave. The cross doesn't whisper comfort. It doesn't sing lullabies to your soul. It screams loud, raw, and violent. It doesn't say, you are loved, like a romantic poem. It says, you were bought, with flesh, with blood, with wounds. The message of the cross isn't soft. It's not peaceful at first glance. It's not gentle or easy. It's brutal, because the kind of love it shows isn't passive. It's not the kind of love you find on a Hallmark card. It's the kind of love that gets torn just to reach you. The cross is offensive because it tells the truth in the most horrifying way possible. Love costs blood. A real love, not words.
Not talk, not emotion.
But sacrifice. The kind of love that goes where no one else would go, into the pit, into the betrayal, into the beatings, the mockery, the suffocation. And still says, Father, forgive them. That's not pudic. That's war. It's rescue, and that rescue required the most violent act in history. People want God to be nice. They want love to feel good. But the cross doesn't feel good. It feels necessary. The weight of sin didn't get lifted by a hug. It got crushed under a Roman nail and a splintered beam. And Jesus didn't die quietly in his sleep. He died screaming, choking, bleeding. Why? Because your salvation cost everything? So no. The cross doesn't whisper love. It screams it across centuries, through earthquakes, through darkness at noon, through the torn veil. It shouts louder than your guilt, louder than your shame, louder than your doubts, but it's not comfortable. And that's why it offends. Because people want love to be clean and safe. The cross is jubilee, dirty and dangerous. It shows us a side of love that the world wants to erase. The part that hurts, the part that sacrifices, the part that says, I'll take the punishment so you can go free. That kind of love breaks you. It brings you to your knees because it makes you ask, why would anyone do that for me? The answer isn't flattering. It's not because you were awesome. It's because you were hopeless. You lost, broken beyond fixing. And Jesus didn't come to fix you. He came to replace you, to take your place on that cross, to trade his perfection for your punishment. That kind of love offends people who think they can earn it. It offends those who want to stay in control. It offends pride, ego, and religion because it says this was the only way, not a gesture, not a statement, a death. So next time you see a cross, don't picture a nice story. Picture a war zone, a crime scene, a battlefield, and then realize that blood was screaming your name, not to guilt you, to save you, because that's what real love does. It doesn't whisper. It bleeds. Not golden, not polished. Not pretty, just wood, just nails, just a man, broken and bleeding, who didn't have to die but chose to. And that's the part that should wreck you, because you weren't just watching it. You were the reason it happened. You didn't accidentally bump into this message. The cross doesn't do coincidence. It calls, it confronts, it cuts. You either walk away offended or you kneel, transformed. There is no neutral. The cross doesn't allow it. So go ahead. Mock it, wear it, ignore it, reject it, preach it, kneel before it. But whatever you do, don't call it harmless. Don't dare call it cute. Because that cross is where hell was defeated. It's where death choked on its own blood. It's where love did the loudest thing it could ever do. It died. And then it got up again. The most offensive symbol in history. Absolutely. And also the most beautiful, if you've got the guts to face it, and the grace to accept what it means. This cross isn't a symbol, it's a sentence, paid in full. So what now? pick it up or walk away. But don't ever say you didn't know.